Hi, I'm Professor Jeffries, Seattle Central Green River Collegeist, and now I'm going to continue talking about history of psychology. Last segment we talked about philosophers and how they contribute to history of psychology. Now we're talking about physiologists and how they contribute to psychology. We're talking about Descartes, Locke, and Comte. Now we're talking about physiology. The first one we're talking about is Marshall Hall. Marshall Hall, he studied reflex behavior. One of his findings was that reflex act independently of the brain. He also discovered what we call the reflex arc. The reflex arc. In other words, let's suppose you step on a nail. What's going to happen is you have a chain of neurons go up your leg, stop at your spinal cord. One chain is going to go onto your brain. The other string will shoot back down your leg. By the time the message gets to your brain, your foot's already going to be up. That's because of your reflex arc. Or you put your hand on a hot stove, you pull it right back up before you think about it. That's reflex arc. And one of the things that Hall talked about, reflexes act independently of the brain. Reflexes act independently of the brain. Next individual I'll talk about is Pierre Flourens. Pierre Flourens destroyed various parts of the brain of animals and observed the results. Okay, he was responsible for shutting down the school or disproving the science of phrenology. Phrenology was a science at that time where they sit in a chair and they measure, they feel your head and they analyze your personality based upon where you had the lumps in your head. At that particular time, it was believed sexuality was the back of the head. And Flourens said, that's bogus. So he took a cat, put the cat under anesthesia, took the back part of the cat's brain out. Cat was clumsy, but he still wanted to eat and had kittens. As a result, Flourens had proved phrenologists wrong. Okay, but he was able to map out the entire brain by destroying various parts, animals, spinal cord, and brain. He's also did a lot of experiments with anesthesia. Anesthesia. I mean, in the 1800s and 1700s, generally, they'd make you do alcohol as the main anesthesia. Just drink till you passed out. They start having surgery. But then Flourens came along and used other methods of anesthesia. Next person we're talking about Leipzig, Germany. Leipzig, Germany. Weber, Ernest Weber. Weber was a physiology teacher, and his goal was to make physiology a science like chemistry. You got to understand the 1800s, so chemistry was a role model for all your other aspiring sciences. Okay, and that was what Weber wanted to do. I want to make physiology a science like chemistry. Weber studied what he called perception. He studied thresholds in particular. He studied peripheral vision for a while, but he came from his research with perception. He came out with what we call Weber's law, which states what a person notices depends upon what they're already experiencing. What one notices depends upon what he or she is already experiencing. I mean, think about this. You ever buy a new car? And now once you buy that car, you start to notice other people have a car just like your car. Oh, wow, that's my car. Or you're driving on the freeway, you're driving down the street on your car, and you get on the freeway, you turn the radio up. Well, you turn the radio up, not just because the volume goes down, but the interference, the noise around goes up, the wind noise, all that goes up to where you can't hear the radio, so you have to turn the radio up. So what a person notices depends upon what a person's already experienced. If you were ringing one bell, add a second bell, you would notice that, versus you ring 10 bells, ring 11th bell, you probably wouldn't notice the 11th bell. And we'll look at that particularly later on when we start about memory, particularly in the reliability of eyewitnesses and other issues. Another individual at Leipzig, Germany was Wundt, Wilhelm Wundt, W-U-N-D-T. In other words, W's in German pronounced as V's. Wundt is considered to be the founder of psychology. And the reason considered to be the founder of psychology, he built the first psychological laboratory. Because it was the first, people came from all over the world to study this guy. Okay. A matter of fact, most of your so-called founding fathers of American psychology were influenced by Wundt. G. Stanley Hall, James Cattell, William James, indirectly to a certain extent. So all these people, the idea of a laboratory. Okay, and he studied, his main method was introspection. Now we call it the interview method. The textbook says self-observation. But it's basically interview method. What do you see? What do you see? Okay, but Wundt's brand of introspection was different because he studied pure perception. In other words, perception in its purest form. For instance, someone asks you, well, what is this? It's not a piece of paper. It's a it's a yellow square object, so thick, so wide, with certain properties. Okay, what is this? It's not a book. It's a rectangular object, so wide, so thick, with a bunch of little rectangular objects inside of a certain color. So he studied perception in its purest form. He also studied thresholds, kind of like Weber did to a certain extent. But he didn't study children because he didn't think you study change children use an introspective method. And he didn't study social behavior because he didn't think you could put social behavior under experimental discourse. Social psychology tells you something different nowadays. But he studied perception in its purest form. Okay, Edward Tishner. Tishner was British. He was from Britain. And he was interested in psychology. But at that time, you couldn't get a psychology class in Britain. So he heard about Wundt in his laboratory, so he went and studied under Wundt. And he's one of the few people who graduated, because a lot of people went to Leipzig and said, oh man, this is what I want to study psychology, I want to study perception, and they left. Whereas Tishner actually got it and graduated, and then he got a job at Cornell University in the United States. And this is where Wundt basically became popular, because I always say Tishner's greatest contribution was he translated Wundt's works into English. Now, people in America, oh, wow, this guy's Wundt. Let's go study what he's doing. Okay, but NASA went over there, came back, said, this is not what I want to do. It's too narrow. I want to study other things. I want to maybe study social behavior. I want to study these things. I don't just want to do this. But like Wundt's goal was to make psychology like chemistry. In other words, break down perception into its elemental parts. Okay, but to people, his students who came there said, that's too narrow. So a lot of people who stayed in Germany became Gestalt psychologists, where people who came to the United States were called functionalists. Okay, and the question is, who are the functionalists? And that's what we'll look at in the next section.